All right, so we're battle of puppy versus kitty. This is a video on how to make an animal head and hopefully make it look somewhat realistic dimensionally. It could be more cartoon looking or more real life looking depending on what approach you take. So here we go. This is what my dog pretty much looks like, so I'm going to go ahead and use this as an image to start with. And so its head is pretty round when I look at it. And if I think about dividing it, I would say that the eyes are just at about center. And they're very round looking, about that far apart. And then down from the center, she has her nose right here. And then right here, she has her snout, and that goes all the way slightly below the circle, so it's a pretty good sized snout. And then looking at this, if you think about in the middle of that is about where the middle of her nose is. So that's the middle of her nose, so I'm going to draw a line here. This one was a little bit high. Draw a line for the top of her nose and the bottom of her nose. It's almost heart-shaped, but it's flat on the top. About like so. It kind of has this little lines going in like this. And then her mouth is down here, which I can't really even quite see that. It is more about like that right now. And of course she has fluffy hair up here. And then she's got kind of ears that come down kind of like so. And this would be an upside down pinch pot that we'll use to make her neck and kind of support her head. So that's kind of looking from the front. Now what I need to do is I need to look for some images from a different angle. All right, so looking at this, it is pretty round. Think about it from the side as well, the profile. This one's looking this way. I'm going to draw it the other way though. So I think about dividing the head here, what happens. All right, so we're ready to make our animal head now. And so you should have roughly about 2 pounds of clay left. So this is 2 pounds here. You may have more or less depending on whether you used more for your other projects or less than they called for. And all of that is fine. So if you have a kitchen scale, you're welcome to measure it out. If you don't, you'll just have to play it by ear. So what I'm going to do is I've got 2 pounds of clay. I'm going to divide this into 2 pieces. So I've got 2 equal pieces pretty much. So I've got 1 pound and 1 pound. And then I'm going to take this half of it and I'm going to divide that in half. Those look pretty equal. So I have 1 pound, 1/2 pound, and 1/2 pound. I'm going to take 1.5 pounds and put it back in the bag, and I'm going to be working with 1/2 pound of clay for this project. So this 1/2 pound, shouldn't say for this project, for this head. So this 1/2 pound is going to make both halves of the head, or 2 pinch pots that make up the head. So I divide that into 2, and now I'm going to wedge those up. So these should be roughly 1/4 pound each. Okay, so they're both wedged. I'm going to set this one aside for a minute and I'm going to work with this one. So I'm going to work it into a ball now. Now remember, your clay should be moist for this, should be wedged. If it's a little bit dry, you can add water to it, and we have a video on how to do that if you don't remember. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this ball of clay and I'm going to make it into a pinch pot. So I'm going to poke my thumb into it as close to the center as possible, and I'm going to pinch it into a bowl shape. So we start at the bottom and then work your way slowly up from there. Now, a couple of things to remember in case you've forgotten. With these, you want nice even wall thicknesses, nice even wall thickness. And you don't want it too thin, you don't want it too thick. You definitely don't want a heavy bottom and thin rims because that'll be difficult to keep your piece together. Now, these 2 animals here were made out of the same amount of clay. This head should be a little bit bigger than these because What'll happen is as it's fired, it shrinks, and so it'll be more that size after it's shrunk. All right, so I'm just smoothing out here. I'm trying to keep that bowl shape. I've left the rim a little bit fatter intentionally. I'll smooth that out here in a moment, or make it thinner in a moment. Okay, what happens if your animal head is smaller or bigger than mine? It just means it's smaller or bigger. You're learning. I'm not asking for anything to be exactly like I'm doing. I'm just teaching you basic techniques, and then from there you'll do what you need to do to make your animal. And if it comes out slightly different, a lot different, that's okay, as long as you're giving me your best effort. Okay, so I have one of the pinch pots made, so I'm going to just set that down, and I'm going to work on the second one. Pretty good. I'm going to pinch this one a little bit more to make it just slightly wider so they match up a little bit better. Once again, don't make the rim super thin though. Keep that thickness consistent throughout your piece. Okay, so those are pretty good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to score these. Now, if you remember, we used paper clips to score originally. I also mentioned you could use a fork. So if I'm using a paper clip, I'm going to go around the edges and scratch that up. Since I'm using a fork, it's going to give me 4 scratches in one. And I'm going to just kind of go at an angle and scratch up kind of a circular motion, but also kind of going in or outward too to give lots of scratching roughness to that. Okay, try not to distort your clay. Don't push so hard that it bends it up. You want to keep it round. All right, so this half looks pretty good. I'm not going to set it on the rim now because I don't want to squish my scoring. I'm going to do the same to this half. Okay, that's pretty good. Now I'm going to take my slip and the popsicle stick. And my slip was getting a little bit dry, so I added a little bit of water and I stirred it up good so that it's kind of a nice consistency again. I don't know if you remember, but the consistency of yogurt is a good consistency for this. All right, that looks pretty good. I'm going to wipe that off, set that aside, and now I'm going to attach these together. So when I put them together, oh, that matches good. I was going to say I'll look for the best match, and then just check all the way around, make sure anything's not overlapping too much. I'm going to work them together a little bit. Remember, so we scored, we added some slip, and now I'm kind of welding them by working them together. And now I'm going to continue welding them by working one piece into the other piece. And I'm going to try using the stick on this to see. Yeah, I'm going to use my thumb. I think it works better for me. Got a little bit of extra slip on there, which makes it more slippery. That's where the stick kind of grabs in. I think I'm liking that better. All right, so I'm just working that seam real good, making sure it's sealed up really nicely. If it's going to want to crack and come apart, this is where it would crack and come apart. And so working that back and forth and sealing it up really well is a good thing to do. All right, so that looks good. At this point, I can paddle it into shape. If you made yourself a paddle or found some type of a paddle to use, you can use that. Otherwise, you can just use your hands. And as you do that, you'll see that as you kind of reshape it, you'll see that open up a little bit. You just have to continually kind of keep working on sealing that back up. And then when we're done, it won't matter. Okay, so I've got the head pretty round at this point. So my thought is I'm going to put wherever it is, it's round in different directions, but I'm going to add that snout about like this here, and I'll add some ears up here, and then the eyes, and I'll make a pinch pot for the neck. Okay, just like in my drawing. So you can kind of see how those cracks are opening up a little bit. So on those cracks, I'm going to force it together and just seal it back up. And then this will be something you kind of continue doing as you're working on the piece. Just as a reminder, the very last step, like the last thing you do before you let it get dry, is you're going to take something like your paper clip and poke a hole in it all the way in so the air can escape. But don't do that when it's soft, because it'll want to have air escape and it'll dent in. Keeping it sealed without a hole helps keep it in shape, because the pressure of the air on the inside will keep you from pushing the clay in as much. You could still, of course, dent it, but that will help. Okay, so I've got that now. So what I'm going to begin doing, I think what I'm going to do is actually make my neck, and then I'll add the snout on their neck. So I'm going to grab this ½ pound of clay that I had, and I don't think I need twice, I don't need this full amount for the neck, but I think I want maybe a little more than half. I don't know, so about like this here. And so I'm going to take this and wedge it, and then work that into a ball. Now, what I don't want this time is a real wide, like a real wide bowl. I'm going to make the bowl a little bit like more upright. And what'll happen is it'll be upside down, and that'll become the neck and the shoulders for the animal. Okay. Now, another thing with this, think about when you do the ears are more than likely going to be thinner, and you don't want to make really thin ears and stick them on there, because really thin ears will have a tendency to break. If you notice this one here, there's a thickness to them, and then where they're connected, it's thick enough where they're connected. Don't make a little skinny connection, because those will have a tendency to want to break off. And then on the cat, its ears are actually little like cone shaped, so they're thick, but they're hollow on the inside. All right, so I'm going to go ahead now and make a neck, keeping in mind I want it a little bit taller rather than super wide. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try some different methods. I'm going to try to pull up rather than just pinch sideways or twist it, and see if I can get it to come upward. Okay. So obviously there's a little connection there. We'll make this thicker here in a moment, but that seems roughly about right to me. So in my drawing of my puppy dog from the profile view, the neck kind of comes to the back like this. Oops, I'll do it this way here, like this. And then from the front, it'll have a little curve. So I'm going to flatten this out and make it so it attaches similar to that. So I'm just, it's like I don't just do it and have it done and just stick it on there. I'm going to check it a few times just to make sure it's what I want. Make sure the thickness. One other quick thing with this is you want to think about this supporting the whole thing so it's not going to fall over easily. So you don't want a super skinny base on it. If you notice the bases on these kind of, they flare out, which helps keep it upright. It's less likely to fall over. Okay, so I'm going to be thinking about this being the front, so I'm going to push this in a little bit. I'm going to flatten here where it's going to attach. And then this is going to be the back that kind of flows into there. So it's going to be similar to that from the profile. I feel like I want this just a little. Actually, I'm going to have my snout on there. So I think that's forward enough. Once I add my snout, that'll be fine. This will be fine. Okay. So I am going to flare it out a little bit more from the side. I want the sides a little wider. All right. So this looks pretty good to me here. I feel like I need to drop this down a little bit so that it's not leaning so far back. There we go. I like that about like that. It's wide enough on the sides. We'll attach that in a little bit. So